guys, Geekonomics here, and today what I'd like to do for you is to have a little look at the price or market mechanism, which you should have covered in your AS Economics studies with regard to the allocation of resources, and then to take that and work that through to the perfectly competitive model to illustrate why in the long run in perfect competition it is always characterized by normal profits in the long run. So this is a simple demand and supply diagram, and one which you will be familiar with from your studies of AS Economics, AS Micro. And of course we can use this to illustrate allocative efficiency, because of course although allocative efficiency we can define it as price equal to marginal cost, so the revenue gained is equal to the cost of producing that final extra additional unit. It is also possible to use this diagram to illustrate allocative efficiency. So let's just work through that. Simple demand and supply diagram, and our start points are P1, Q1, starting point A, we have equilibrium. Now I'm assuming here that this is a perfectly competitive market, and therefore there are no barriers to entry and exit. It's very important that we assume that. And I'm also assuming, ladies and gentlemen, that at equilibrium point A, the firms in this particular industry are making normal profit. What do we mean by normal profit? Normal profit is a sum which is just sufficient to keep the firm in its present employment. So it will not entice new firms into the industry, and similarly it will not force existing firms to leave. So if I'm a hairdresser and I make 10 grand profits a year and the hairdresser down the road makes the same, we're making normal profit. Let's assume we have an increase in demand, and as a consequence of that, as I'm sure you know, the demand curve will shift to the right. So there we have it. So D has now moved to D2. What happens, ladies and gentlemen? We move to a new equilibrium position, P2 and Q2 at equilibrium point B. Now what characterises equilibrium point B? A few things. Number one, we've gone from A to B. A was making normal profit. Price has risen to P2. We are now assuming that we are making abnormal profits, ladies and gentlemen. And look here, more resources have been dedicated to the production of this good because output is moving from Q1 to Q2. So in a perfectly competitive market, people will be looking in at this market, they'll be seeing these potential abnormal profits. What will they want? They will want a slice of this cake, ladies and gentlemen. They will want to enter this market. Can they enter the market? Of course they can. It is perfectly competitive. And so what will happen, ladies and gentlemen, is as follows. The supply curve will shift to the right. Why will it shift to the right? Because new suppliers will enter the market. And so now we have a new equilibrium position. Just see if we can straighten this up a little bit. Now we have a new equilibrium position. Get that parallel. There we go. And our new equilibrium position is here at point C, where output is now Q3. So we've gone from A to B, normal profit, to abnormal profit. This abnormal profit attracts more firms into the industry. Consequently, supply in the industry increases as new firms enter, and those abnormal profits are eaten up and eroded away, so that we end up back in a position where we are making normal profits once again. However, this is a great example of allocative efficiency because we had an increase in demand for this good, and as a consequence of that, we have had more resources dedicated to its production because, as you can see, quantity demanded and supplied have gone from Q1 to Q3. So that's our market mechanism, the price or market mechanism. And of course, it works in the opposite direction as well, which you'll see when we go through the perfectly competitive market diagram. So let's just do that. Now this is useful obviously for those of you who are doing F584, which is transport, and also F583, those of you who are doing the economics of work and leisure. So in a perfectly competitive market, we've already said, no barriers to entry or exit, and the firm is said to be a price taker. It's not like a monopolist who would be a price maker. The perfectly competitive firm, which you can see on the right hand side here, is a price taker. Where do they take the price from? They take it from the equilibrium point, which is determined in the industry. So here's the industry price. So this perfectly competitive firm has to accept that price, and so as a consequence, P star here, we can illustrate that as you know, that is a perfectly elastic demand curve in this case. And as you'll know, we can say that this is the AR curve, which is equal to MR as well. If you're not sure why that is, I'll run through that at the end. So what else do we need to add here, ladies and gentlemen? We need to add our cost curve, our average total cost curve, our ATC or AC, whichever you prefer. And we also need to add our marginal cost curve, our supply curve. So there we have it, the MC curve. Remember, MC is also the supply curve, and the AR curve, as I'm sure you know, AR is also the demand curve. That's another word for demand in this case. So equilibrium, this is the long run equilibrium position in a perfectly competitive model, and the profit maximizer will maximize profits where MC equals MR, which of course is here. Or, in the case of perfect competition, it's where the supply curve cuts the demand curve, intersects the demand curve. And so our quantity, Q star, there are a few significant features about Q star. First of all, it's the long run position. It's the long run equilibrium, this diagram. What else is significant about it? Not only is it the long run, ladies and gentlemen, we are also making normal profit. Why are we making normal profit? Because the revenue gained from selling the last unit is equal to the cost of its production. And, ladies and gentlemen, in addition to that, there are two types of efficiencies which are very important here. Number one, we have allocative efficiency. Remember, P equals MC. So price equals marginal cost at this point. So that's allocatively efficient. And also, price is equal to minimum average total cost. We can see that we're at the bottom of the ATC curve here. And so that, as you know, is productive efficiency. So we have allocative efficiency, we have productive efficiency, and these two things together, you'll know this is called economic efficiency, or sometimes referred to as Pareto efficiency, after the famous economist Vilfredo Pareto. So that's our long run equilibrium position. So let's just look at what happens in the short run, and this is where our analysis of the price and market mechanism will help us. So let me just move this on, let me just, oops, not what we want to do. Let me just take a little copy of this, ladies and gentlemen, in case we need to come back to this. Okay, so let's see what happens in the short run. So again, we have the same start point, P star. So the firm has to accept P star. And again, AR is equal to MR. We have our ATC curve. And we have our MC curve. I would stress, ladies and gentlemen, it is time well spent just learning these diagrams and just drawing them and redrawing them, so you can just do them instantaneously without any problem. So in this short run, what's going to happen? Well, I'm going to assume, as we did in the very first slide of this particular video, I'm going to assume that we have an increase in the demand for this particular product. And so demand shifts from D1 up to D2, and now we've got a new price at P2. Now, because the firm in a perfectly competitive market has to accept the price, they're price takers, that means that they now accept this new price P2. And so we can draw a new AR equals MR, so a new demand curve in effect. We can draw that here. And of course now we have a whole new set of equilibrium and also allocative and productive efficiency points, or inefficiency as the case may be. So let's get the output first of all. So we're looking for MC equal to MR. So that's this point here, as I'm sure you're aware. Take that down. So there's our Q2 level of output. But more significantly, ladies and gentlemen, more significantly, what else can we say about this? So here we have the cost curve, as you can see, and I've just taken the costs across there. That's the costs, and you can see now that the price P2, which the individual firm receives, is much greater than the cost of producing this level of output Q2. And so as a consequence, we just shade this in, as a consequence, we can now see that we have an area here where revenue is greater than cost, and I'm sure you know that this is therefore referred to as supernormal profit in some textbooks. In some textbooks you'll see it referred to as abnormal profit. And in some textbooks you'll see it referred to as monopoly rent. All of these things really mean the same thing, so it's over and above normal profit. And it's also, ladies and gentlemen, it is also, as you can see, price, whilst it may equal marginal cost here, price does not equal the minimum point on the average total cost curve. So this is productively inefficient at this level of output Q2. Now, the great thing, the self-correcting, the great thing about the perfectly competitive market, as we've already said, if there are abnormal profits to be earned, potential entrants, they can just dive into this market and exploit those potential profits. And so what will happen in the long run, I stress again, in the long run, the supply curve for the industry will shift to the right. Now, of course, the reason that it will shift to the right is because new firms, didn't mean to do that. The reason that it will shift to the right, I can't get rid of that, let's just ignore that point. The reason that it will shift to the right is because new firms looking in will say, I want a slice of that pie, I'm getting into that market. Supply shifts to S2, and we're back to our P star position, where we're back again on our initial diagram where we are making normal profit. So we're back in this position again, here, where we're once again allocatively and productively efficient. Now, of course, we can work that the other way as well. Let me see if this will do this for me. Paste, 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 paste. Right. If we run this in the other direction, so again, price taker, there's the price, there's the average revenue equal to marginal revenue, there's the average total cost curve, there's the marginal cost curve. Okay, that's our start point. So what ladies and gentlemen, we're happy if it worked in the other direction, so if demand fell. Well, let's just work that one through as well. So a reduction in demand, we will go here, obviously. So D1 here goes to D2. Our new equilibrium price, P2, again, the firm is a price taker, has to accept it. So now the new price for the firm is P2. So it's obviously down here. Once again, AR is equal to MR at this position. What's the level of output? It's where MC equals MR, so it's here. Let me just change that. So it's here. So that's Q2. But interestingly again, ladies and gentlemen, look what's happening. The costs are now here. Take this across. This is our cost. So we're receiving that revenue, but that's our cost. So this area here is now, in the short run, once again, this would be referred to as obviously subnormal profit in some textbooks, or plain old losses. Now, of course, in perfectly competitive markets, there are no barriers to exit either. And so what will happen and what can happen is that the supply curve will, in this instance, supply will adjust because supply will shift to the left as existing firms exit the market. Remember, normal profits, just a sum sufficient to keep the currently employed manufacturers and firms in their business. There's no incentive to leave or enter. Here we have an incentive to leave. So firms will leave, supply will shift left, like so. So we can straighten that up. No, we can't. Right, let's just leave it. And so now we have another new equilibrium position here. Look again, ladies and gentlemen, back at P star, and really we're ending up back again, back in this long run position where we're making normal profit, allocatively efficient, productively efficient, Pareto efficient. So that is the way the perfectly competitive market works, ladies and gentlemen. Remember also that a contestable market can also be a substitute for perfectly competitive markets, because again, the characteristics of a contestable market are no barriers to entry and exit, there are no sunk costs. Costs once made, they cannot be fully recovered and recouped. And so in the long run, again, in contestable markets, it is characterized by making normal profits. Because if there are potential opportunities and profits to be exploited, existing firms will remain, but new firms will enter and they'll hit the market and then run. Remember, it's classified and characterized by hit and run entry in a contestable market. So the only thing remaining, ladies and gentlemen, for me to do for you would just be to say one little thing about this, which I said earlier. We are saying here that price equals average revenue equals marginal revenue. So we're basically saying that the perfectly competitive firm can sell as many goods as it wants at this price P star. But why does AR equal MR? Well, a straightforward worked example will just show this to you. So if we take levels of output, price, total revenue, average revenue, marginal revenue. And let's just work this through a couple of levels. So let's say we've got output 1. The price, P star, let's say it's 10, 2 and 10, 3 and 10. Remember, the price is the same all the time, perfectly elastic demand curve. So what's the total revenue? Obviously 10, 20, 30. What's the average revenue? So 10 over 1 is 10, 20 over 2 is 10, 30 over 3, 10. What's the marginal revenue? Remember the definition of marginal revenue, the change in total revenue from selling one additional unit of output. So when we go from 1 to 2, what's the change in total revenue? 10. When we go from 2 to 3, what's the change in total revenue? 10. And so here you can see, ladies and gentlemen, that price equals average revenue equals marginal revenue, hence P equals AR equals MR. Okay, I hope you found that useful. I hope your revision's going well. Do send me any messages about things you'd like me to look at, and I'll do my best to do that. So that's